April 13th, 1970. 200,000 miles from Earth, Mission Control gives Apollo 13 a routine order they have followed a dozen times already: stir the oxygen tanks. 2 minutes later, the spacecraft slams sideways. This is the real radio call, not the line from the movie. Jack Swigert: "Okay, Houston, I believe we've had a problem here." 14 minutes after that, Commander Jim Lovell looks out the window and watches his own oxygen boiling away into space, with no way yet to know if any of them will make it home. Everyone thinks they know this story. Almost none of it happened the way the movie says. This is the actual transcript, the real crew, and the last man alive who was on that spacecraft, because the other two are gone. You're watching Mindwired. This is the real story of Apollo 13, the actual transcript behind the movie's most famous lines, the exact wiring failure that nearly killed 3 men, and what happened to the crew in the 56 years since, including 2 real events from just the last year. 12 boys and their coach were never on this flight. Apollo 13 carried 3 men: Commander Jim Lovell on his second trip to the moon, Lunar Module pilot Fred Haise on his first space flight, and Command Module pilot Jack Swigert, who was not even supposed to be there. 72 hours before launch, backup astronaut Charlie Duke came down with German measles. Prime pilot Ken Mattingly had never had the disease. Lovell and Haise were already immune. Mattingly was not, so NASA pulled him from his own flight and flew Swigert in his place. Mattingly never got sick. Instead, he spent the entire crisis on the ground, helping write the exact procedure that would bring the spacecraft back to life. April 11th, 1970, 2:13 p.m. Apollo 13 lifts off from Kennedy Space Center, headed for a place no crew had tried to land before, the Fra Mauro Highlands. By this point in the Apollo program, 2 crews had already landed on the moon. The public had started calling it routine. That night, the major television networks did not carry the crew's live broadcast. They aired regular programming instead. The mission everyone assumed would be the boring one became the one nobody has ever stopped talking about. Lovell's target wasn't even the flat, easy ground the first 2 landings used. Apollo 13 was aiming for the Fra Mauro Highlands, rougher terrain nobody had tried to put a spacecraft down on, because scientists believed it held rock from deep in the moon's early history. 2 days into the flight, with the crew already past the moon's halfway point, Mission Control had no idea the tank that would nearly kill all 3 of them had already failed a ground test 3 weeks before launch, and been fixed with a shortcut nobody flagged as dangerous. The failure did not begin in space. It began 2 years earlier, on the ground, in a mistake nobody at the time thought mattered. October 1968, Oxygen Tank 2 is being removed from an earlier spacecraft for a modification. A bolt is left in place. A lifting fixture breaks. The tank drops 2 inches. It passes every test afterward. NASA installs it in the spacecraft that will fly Apollo 13. Nobody knows anything is wrong. March 1970. 3.5 weeks before launch. During a routine ground test, Oxygen Tank 2 will not fully drain. Not once. Technicians try again on different days. It won't go below 92%. So they improvise a fix. They switch on the tank's internal heaters using ground power at 65 volts for 8 cumulative hours to boil the oxygen out through brute force. The tank's safety thermostat is only rated for 28 volts, the normal voltage in flight. Nobody had ever retested it at 65. Under that much power, the switch does not open like it's supposed to. It welds itself shut. Inside a sealed, welded tank nobody can see into, the heat destroys the Teflon insulation on the wiring. The damage is invisible from the outside. The pre-launch review never catches it. 55 hours, 52 minutes into the mission, a routine alarm goes off. Low pressure in an unrelated hydrogen tank. It is nothing serious, but it means Mission Control asks for one more housekeeping task. We'd like you to stir up your cryo tanks. Capcom Jack Lausmer radios up. It is a request the crew has carried out dozens of times on this flight alone. Swigert flips the switch. Inside Oxygen Tank 2, the damaged wiring arcs. It ignites the pure oxygen atmosphere inside the tank. 55 hours, 54 minutes, 53 seconds. The tank ruptures. It blows an entire panel off the side of the spacecraft and damages the only other oxygen tank on board. Okay, Houston, I believe we've had a problem here. That is the real line. Not, we have a problem, Swigert said it first, in the past tense, and added one word the movie always leaves out, here. 15 seconds later, Lovell repeats it, more precisely, we've had a main B bus undervolt. In mission control, an engineer named LIFEBOAT is the first to understand what the numbers mean. I've got a feeling we've lost 2 fuel cells, he says. I hate to put it that way. Within 2 minutes, the spacecraft loses all 3 fuel cells and both oxygen tanks. The command module that was supposed to carry them home is now dying. There is no single voice giving the order to abort. One flight director wants to turn back immediately. Flight director Gene Kranz and his deputy argue for a few more minutes first to actually understand what just happened before making a decision they can't undo. The line NASA is famous for, failure is not an option, was never said that night. It was written 25 years later for the movie. What Kranz actually told his team was different and just as certain. I have never lost an American in space. Sure as hell aren't going to lose one now. This crew is coming home. There is only one part of the spacecraft that still has power, oxygen, and an engine. The lunar module built to land 2 men on the moon for 2 days. It now has to keep 3 men alive for 4. Before the accident, the spacecraft was not even aimed at Earth. It was on a path meant to reach the moon and land, not to come home. Without another engine burn, it would miss Earth by nearly 3,000 miles. Lovell manually fires the lunar module's landing engine for 35 seconds, putting the spacecraft back on a path that will loop the moon and coast home on gravity alone if nothing else is done. A second burn, 4 minutes and 24 seconds long, speeds the return by 10 hours. Lovell flies it by hand, using the line between day and night on Earth as his only guide, because the guidance computer has been shut off to save power. The man who lost his seat to a measles scare, Ken Mattingly, spends the entire crisis on the ground, helping design the exact power-up sequence that will bring the command module back to life days later. The astronaut who never got to fly ends up being one of the reasons the other 3 make it home. 3 men breathing in a space built for 2 creates a new problem. Carbon dioxide climbing toward a lethal level with the wrong-shaped air filters to fix it. On the ground, a NASA engineer named Ed Smiley and his team build a fix out of what the astronauts already have on board: 2 square air filters, a plastic bag, cardboard torn from a flight manual, and a roll of tape. They read the instructions up to the crew, piece by piece. Swigert builds it by hand, in 0 gravity, in a spacecraft that is now freezing. It works within minutes. The command module has been powered down and freezing since the night of the explosion. To survive re-entry, it has to be turned back on, using a procedure NASA has never had to write before. Normally, powering up a spacecraft from a cold stop takes 3 months of planning. Mission Control writes this one from scratch in 3 days. By now, the cabin temperature has dropped near freezing. Every window is coated in condensation. The crew has had almost no food or sleep in 4 days. Following the new checklist line by line, the crew brings the command module back to life, 1 system at a time. By now, the men have barely eaten or slept in 4 days, in a cabin so cold that Swigert reports the temperature near 45 degrees, every window fogged with condensation. Nobody on that spacecraft trained for this. Nobody could have. April 17th, 1970. The spacecraft begins re-entry. Radio contact is expected to go silent for 3 minutes and 38 seconds. It runs almost twice that long. In Mission Control, nobody says it out loud, but everyone is thinking the same thing. The heat shield, damaged by the explosion, might have failed. Then, at just over 6 minutes, the radio comes back. Parachutes open. The command module lands in the South Pacific, 3 miles from the recovery ship. The helicopter lifts all 3 men out of the ocean and onto the deck of the USS Iwo Jima. The radio call back to Houston is 4 words long. His condition is excellent. 87 hours after a routine command triggered an explosion 200,000 miles from home, all 3 men walk away. NASA convened its own investigation within hours of splashdown. 8 people, led by engineer Edgar Courtwright, including Apollo 11's own Neil Armstrong. 2 months later, their report reached one conclusion, in NASA's own words. The accident was not the result of a chance malfunction, but the result of an unusual combination of mistakes, coupled with a somewhat deficient and unforgiving design. 1 dropped tank, 1 untested voltage, 1 welded switch. Nobody broke a rule. Nobody was careless in the moment. The failure was built years before anyone stirred a single tank. NASA's fix wasn't a warning label. Every later Apollo command module flew with a 3rd, physically separated oxygen tank, fuel cells that could be individually isolated, and wiring rerouted away from the tank walls entirely. None of the 4 crewed Apollo missions that followed ever had another in-flight failure like it. 12 years later, Jack Swigert was elected to the United States Congress. He never took his seat. He had been diagnosed with bone cancer during the campaign and died in December 1982, 1 week before he would have been sworn in. Jim Lovell commanded Apollo 13 and never flew in space again. He died at home in Illinois in August of last year at the age of 97. He was our hero, his family said. We will miss his unshakable optimism, his sense of humor, and the way he made each of us feel we could do the impossible. Fred Haise is now the only member of the crew still alive. He is 92 years old, and he still makes public appearances, still answers questions about the mission that nearly killed him 56 years ago. None of the 3 men ever flew in space again after this mission. For all 3 of them, the flight that almost killed them was also the last one they ever made. 2 months before he died, Jim Lovell recorded one more message for a crew that hadn't launched yet. April 6th of this year, NASA's Artemis II crew flew farther from Earth than any human beings in history, breaking the distance record Apollo 13 had held for 56 years. That same morning, NASA played Lovell's recorded message to the new crew, exactly as he had asked. "Welcome to my old neighborhood," he told them. A month before that, a documentary called Odyssey premiered at the Tribeca Festival, built from 2,500 hours of never-before-seen footage, told entirely through Jim Lovell's own family's perspective. No narrator, no interviews, just the real archive. 56 years after Apollo 13 flew farther than any spacecraft with astronauts on board ever had, a new crew flew past it, carrying a message from a man who wasn't alive to see it happen. 56 years later, the phrase everyone remembers is still wrong, and the record everyone thinks is unbreakable was broken this year by people carrying the same message the man who set it recorded before he died. The real transcript said, "We've had a problem," past tense, and then 3 men and thousands of people on the ground made sure it didn't stay one. If a crisis with an ending this close still had this much of the real story left out, wait until you see the one where the story everyone thinks they know isn't even the right disaster. That full story is live on this channel right now. Subscribe to Mindwired. If any of this messed with your head a little, well, that's exactly the point. And it only happens because people like you keep showing up. And
hit subscribe right now for it. It costs you nothing, and it's the entire reason Mindwired keeps making videos like this. Subscribe.